going to like Arabic or Russian and stuff like that. And so you just like end up with a lot of like holes in your vocabulary that are like, super hard to fill.
And language is mostly just input. So if you're inputting enough, it should be you should be able to get proficient at it eventually, provided you're not doing anything to mess up the process.
Yeah, I don't want to take over the conversation, but just like I feel like I'm beating this horse dead. But like, if the language is like a far linguistic distance, it like takes like years and years longer to learn. It's just so much harder, in my experience.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But so the U.S. government actually has like a pretty solid like timeline for how long it takes to like learn a language properly. And I think for Chinese, it's like for Chinese, Arabic, Japanese, and Korean, it's around 4,000 hours to become like fluent, not even like native level.
Yeah, and the text doesn't help, right? Like at least with Cyrillic, like I think there's like a decent like one-to-one mapping between like the letters. Like D kind of looks like that weird trapezoid like Cyrillic D, but like when you're going to like Chinese, forget about it.
I actually, believe it or not, I actually prefer the character-based languages to the alphabet-based ones.
You mean like Chinese?
Yeah, Chinese, Japanese. I actually prefer those way over alphabets.
It's like they're cool and stuff, but they're just like impractical. So, for example, like I learned Chinese when I was in my early 20s, and so I can't handwrite any characters. I can only type it because all Chinese characters can be represented by English letters. And so, because I never had any, like, I never went to school, I never had to do tests or whatever. I just like learned how to write Chinese on a keyboard, and yeah, I don't know. Like the characters, they look cool, but like, man, it makes it so much harder to read stuff, and it also makes it harder to learn because, like, if you're in China or whatever, and you're like driving around, like you're not learning new words as you look at like the stores and stuff like that on their awnings because they're new characters that you don't even recognize. But if you like speak English or French or whatever, and you go to like Spain or Mexico, you're gonna pick up like tons and tons of words because all the words in Spanish are similar and they use like the same letters. And so even if they're not similar, you're like, all right, that kind of looks like a pharmacy. Oh, it says pharmacia with an F. Like, all right. So there's like a bajillion reasons why. Yeah.
I don't agree with you. I don't agree with you. I think the only reason you think that way is because you've gotten so used to English as your first language.
Well, I'm not saying that you can't learn from the. Oh, you're talking about the characters. You think it's easier to learn you think the characters are better than like 26 letter alphabet?
Yes. I think the characters are way better.
Go on.
So basically, the characters are just memorization, right? But when you think about it, right, you've already done memorization with words, right? So when you know how to spell beautiful, for example, right? If you had not memorized how to spell beautiful, there's no fucking chance you would ever be able to spell beautiful, right? Because it's such a fucking weird spelling, right? So you, just through comprehension and just through seeing the word enough and writing it enough, have managed to understand that this is how you write the word. Right? Same thing applies with Chinese characters, right? The character-based languages. So it's just about jamming these things into your head, which I find quite easy, to be honest. But I think that once you jam these into your head, right, the language, it actually makes a lot more sense. So you get to read a sentence, right, where you don't understand what a word is, right? And you look at that word, and just through the context of the sentence, and just from the characters, based on the other characters you can very accurately deduce what that word means, right? But you just don't know how to say it. That's the opposite in a language like English, where you see what the word is, right? How it sounds. sounds, right? Or maybe like based on how it's how the sounding is done, it might not even sound anything like how it's spelled. But in general, you get to see how it sounds, right? But you don't get anything from the meaning. With the Chinese characters, once you know them well enough, you actually get a sense of what the word means just based off of the previous characters which you know.
Yeah, so for people who don't know how to read Chinese, what Ada is saying is right. So like there are within characters in Chinese, there are like sub characters. So like you know how some Chinese characters are like really simple looking, and then there's some Chinese characters that like maybe if you go to Chinatown or whatever, they're like really dense blocks of like different character strokes and stuff like that. So inside those dense block character strokes, there are sub characters, and the sub characters have meaning. So all the different metals, like from lead to iron to like all the old school metals, nothing like crazy like seabordium or whatever. They all have this like little thing in them that like kind of like means metal, and so there is an element of that. In that you can be like, all right, so you can look at the context of the sentence, and then you can look at the character, and you can be like, look, I don't recognize this character, but I know it's like some sort of metal because it's got like the metal sub character in it. But the thing about beautiful that is like nice, the thing about beautiful that's beautiful is like if I can remember the word, the sound for beautiful, I at least can know how to spell it, sort of, right? And I can like kind of get close. Whereas if I'm listening to if I know the sound for beautiful in Chinese, which is piao liang, I have no effing idea like how to draw that character. And literally, I have no idea.
It's the compromises, I think, right? So with Chinese characters, you get to understand what the word means, but not how to say it. With English, you get to see how the word sounds, but not what it means. So that's the compromise between the two.
With English, though, I don't know what the right word is, but like there are roots. I can't think of like you know, like if you're taking the word beautiful, right, it ends in full, and so you can be like, well, you know, it's full of whatever perceived beauty. And so there is an element of like just being able to look at the characters and
yeah, but that's not always the case.
Right.
Where it sounds anything like it, right? Like you look at some of the roots and you're like, how the fuck did they get to that? You know?
True, but it's still way better than Chinese, where there's like no relationship between there's almost never a relationship between the sound and the characters. Very rarely. And then I've never been the tones of Chinese are just like an absolute nightmare.
Yeah, I don't know any Chinese. But I know Japanese, which uses similar which almost uses the same exact characters, right? Minus some differences, right? So they use a traditional characters, right? But the characters themselves have a picture, right? They have something that they are related to. It's not that the characters themselves don't have the sound. It's just that the language itself has set a sound upon them, right?
If you guys go to like a Chinese restaurant, like the one of the best characters is and it's as Auda is saying, it's true. It's the same character in Japanese too. Because Japanese like they have their own like weird squiggly characters, but they combine it with a bunch of Chinese characters.
Yeah, so no, they have katakana and hiragana, and they combine that with kanji, which is the traditional Chinese characters. Some of them are slightly different, but it's mostly the traditional characters which you find in Taiwan.
Yeah, so I learned Chinese for business, and then on the way back from China to the USA, I like stopped in Japan, and like I went to like a restaurant. I was like, holy shit, I can kind of read some of this. It blew my mind.
Yeah, exactly. That's my point.
Yeah, exactly. And then to your other
Taiwan, and I have a good idea of what I'm doing, even though I don't know any Chinese.
Right. But to your point, some of the characters, they like look like the thing, and they look like they're the thing in like a really funny way. Like the character for chicken, it like kind of looks like a chicken, and the character for meat, which is like rope, it looks like someone who's doing an actual barbecue. And you know, the word for meat is clearly the most important word in the language. So it's cool. You can look at it when you're on like looking at a menu or stuff like that.
some of the differences when you go to Japan are just from the fact that you learned probably separate from Chinese, right? Not traditional.
Oh, right, yeah, I can, like, I learned simplified, I never learned traditional because there was no point.
But yeah, for me, because I'm so good at like jamming things into my head, right? I use SRS to basically memorize everything. So like I know like all the flags of every country on earth. You know, I just jam information into my head like that.
What is SRS?
Space repetition software. So something like Anki.
How do you store the information in your brain? So for me, like I can't remember the words to the Pledge of Allegiance like at all, or even I can barely like sing Happy Birthday. That's like the limit of my like auditory verbal memory. But so I just encode everything as images.
So basically, SRS is basically this guy called Piotr Wozniak in Poland, basically discovered that one of the way to make information stick in your head, right, is to do space repetition. So just as you're about to forget an information, right, your brain is supposed to be able to recover that information so it sticks into your long-term memory, so from your short-term to long-term memory, right? And the biggest software that does this today is Anki, right? So this is a very, very basic version of what I'm going to say, right? But it kind of gets you the idea. So imagine you have a bunch of flashcards, right? You have 50 flashcards, and you want to memorize all of these flashcards, right? So let's say you get this one correct, 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 right? All of those cards would be shown to you the next day. And then the next day, you would go and do it again, right? And then you would get all of them right again, and it would show you in 2 days after that day. So 3 days in the original, right? And then you get them all right again, right? And then 5 days later, 5 days after the previous one, right? It would show it to you again, right? Like this, it keeps adding distance and adding distance and adding distance. And then let's say you get it wrong again, and not this time you get it wrong for the first time, right? So if you got it right, it would show it to you in 13 days, but you got it wrong. So it sends it back to the first day. It does this until the information is pretty much like solidified.
But like, what do you use to like? What are you memorizing? Because I wouldn't want to spend my time to learn the flags, right? Like, I would want to spend my time to like learn like first principles in mnemonics and stuff like that. And for me, I wouldn't be surprised if a more effective way to learn that would be to like solve a problem using the mnemonic. And the other two things that I do to help me remember things is I'll like translate it from like an image to something else. So one of the like I selfishly write tweets a lot, not actually because like I want to post a banger and get a bunch of likes, but actually because I want to take information that I have in my brain that might be like encoded as an image, and then I convert it into words into a tweet, which then like helps it solidify in my brain. And then the third thing I do is I try to like figure out ways to like run emotion through concepts, because I think I've read some study or something, maybe my psych teacher told me a long time ago that helps you remember stuff.
Yeah, so you can pretty much use SRS for anything, right? People use it to learn the piano, people use it to study math, people use it to study physics. You can really use it to learn anything. I will say for like topics like math and physics, it's probably like more advanced as to how you would use SRS, because you can't just jam everything directly in flashcards, right? But for something like learning Chinese characters, that should be really simple. Just put the Chinese character and then what they sound like, and then what it's actually representing. For something like that, it's like super simple, super easy. You can like do it pretty easily.
Do you guys know about the mind palace or the memory palace?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Memory palace, the mnemonics. I know about those, but it's especially powerful if you're using it with flashcards, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I gotta try that, but I have to find something that like I want to memorize in that way, and I'm not sure what I would want to like. Like you said the flags? What else are like? What would you say is the number one thing that you use this for that you feel like is beneficial to you? Because it obviously like eats up your time, unless you can like
Not
figure out.
really. Not really. So let's say, right? Let's say that. So you don't do everything in one sitting, right? So let's say I've got like I don't know, 5,000 things I want to learn, right? 5,000 things I want to learn, right? I make all of these 5,000 things into flashcards, right? Or if there's already a good pre-made one, I just download a good pre-made one, right? Or you can even pay people on Fiverr to do it for you, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, the best way to stick it in your head is to make the flashcards yourself, right? But sometimes you don't have the time for that, right? So what you would do is you would find the best way. So there's multiple ways you can do the flashcards. You can do them back and front cards. You can do closed deletion cards, and then you would basically put the cards in, right? And then you can choose a number of cards that you're doing extra every day, right? So let's say you set it to 10. You're doing 10 cards a day, 10 extra cards a day, right? So that should put you in the 70 to 100 range of cards once you're every single day, right? Once you kind of got it into the program, right? That should not take more than 20 minutes, right?
Right, but
And in 500 days, right, you will have gone through all of those cards, right? And all of those, then the process is just solidifying all of that information in your mind. And some of those cards have already been solved button in your mind.
But like, what information do you use that for? Like on some level, it like doesn't matter if I know like Togo and Benin and Guinea-Bissau and like 189 countries.
I'm saying I literally use it for learning everything.
Everything.
So yes. So if I'm reading a research paper and I want to jam things into my head, I put it into the flashcard. If I want to learn a certain part of math, I put it in the flashcard. If I want to learn certain characters in Japanese, I put it in the flashcard. Right?
But like let's say you took like the paper for Bitcoin, right? Like how would you even like for me, I wouldn't know how to store that as a series of flashcards. I don't think so.
So basically, what you would do, if you have to use Anki, I think using RemNote for this might be better, but RemNote might be a bit more difficult to use. But let's say you want to use Anki. So what you would do is you would basically read through the flashcard, not flashcard, you would read through the Bitcoin white paper, right? And then anything you don't understand, right, you write down. Anything in the white paper you don't understand, you write down, right? They have a list of the things you don't understand. Then you go in and research all of those things, right? Break them down into the simplest components, make all of those into flashcards. Then you just simply have to review them, right? After reviewing them, right, they will become solidified in your mind.
Okay, the more I thought about, okay, that makes sense to me. I think you could do it. Like you kind of just like you need to like understand all the like parts of the process. You just like gotta break that paper into component parts. And then does the order matter at all? Like the order in the Mind Palace feels like it matters, but for Anki it doesn't matter.
Depends on what you're learning, right? So sometimes the order is important for things to learn, but if it's like let's say you're learning physics, right? Let's say I've made a deck for physics, right? Then obviously the order matters. Like some topics I can't enter unless I have like knowledge of the previous topic, right? So in that case, I can make it so its order is sequential. So I go through all the cards sequentially, right? But if it's a topic that is actually better for me to study randomly, because if I do it sequentially, it would give me too many hints on the other cards, then I would set it to do it randomly.
So I didn't get very far in physics, and like my understanding is like advanced physics does require some amount of memorization because it is non-intuitive in the sense that like we don't like our brains can't so easily understand things like quarks and like flipping or all that weird stuff. But like we can very like a lot of like we can understand how like a ball as it rolls down a hill or something like accelerates. Like I would just visualize that. But you would how would you like do like the parabolic equation of like a cannonball being shot out of a cannon using Anki? It doesn't even make sense to me. Or maybe I'm just wrong and you could break that down into a bunch of components.
So you would break everything down into a bunch of components, but yes, you do need to do some practice questions, right? So Anki, right, is not 100% of like the learning process, right? But it should be like a pretty good component of it, right? Because you're actually solidifying the information that you've learned into your mind, right? So you want to learn something, right? You want to learn something. Let's say you want to learn, let's just say physics, right? The example you just described, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you would ideally have to solve questions like that, right? But, right, if you just do the questions, eventually you're going to forget them when you don't use them.
Right. Yeah.
So,
that makes sense.
so, right, and you're going to be put in a position where you can't use those anymore, right? And because you've forgotten the process, you've forgotten the formulas, you've forgotten the definitions, you've forgotten everything, right? Because you've done spaced repetition, that shit is not certified in your brain, and you'll be able to use those going forward, doing it continuously, right? So it's not 100%. I still recommend you would like do some examples, solving questions, right? Solving questions is a great way to learn using mnemonics and using the mind palace, anything you can get to stick in your mind. But Anki is the thing that's going to help you solidify it in your mind. That's why I said it's better if you make the flashcards yourself, because making them yourself is essentially your first review.
I just downloaded the Anki app. Is that what is that the was it? I don't want to do flashcards. I'm too lazy for that. But like, is the app like solid?
Which one did you download? Because there's like a bunch of fraud companies that are using the Anki name. But for example, medical school, right? I'll give you an example. Medical school specifically, right? Most students that are going through medical school use Anki, right? There's like a whole dedicated community on Reddit, right? Medical school Anki. You can go and look at them. They have like that massive decks, right? Thousands of flashcards that you can like study from for those people, right? So you can really literally learn anything using flashcards, but it shouldn't be your only source of thing, right?
Okay. Yeah, I grabbed Anki Pro.
No, do not use Anki Pro.
Okay.
It's like a fraud company that's using the name because it's faulty. I'll send you the actual website for it.
All right. Cool. Thank you.
It's if you're using it on the desktop, it's free, right? And you can make an account to sync it up to the web. But if you're using the iPhone app, it's like $30.
I mean, if you're gonna do this though, you're gonna spend so much time with it that like you gotta splurge a little on that big boy $30 app.
Yeah, it's I've spent probably thousands of hours.
Yeah, it sucks when you sell something that's not very expensive that your customers. I mean, it doesn't suck. It's like cool. It's still gratifying, but it sucks when you make like $3 on something and people will like literally spend like 6,000 hours into it. And you're putting all that time into it. You're like, man, I wish I could figure out a way to have in-app purchases in Anki or like purchases.
Anki is literally open source software, so the guy that made it is literally open source it. And like the $30 that he's charging
Anki mobile flashcards?
Yeah, I believe that's what
All right, I'm doing it. I'm confident. I hope that guy's last name was Anki. Because
it
otherwise,
wasn't. It wasn't. It wasn't.
some sort of acronym.
No, Anki is a word in Japanese.
Oh, okay. He was Japanese? He
No.
just-
He just used it to, I think he just made it sort of Japanese.
So why'd you learn Japanese? Because you're not old. And like Japanese, well, it had to be like some sort of like weird like anime manga thing.
Like, yeah, I guess that's part of it, right? It's just that, basically, I learned languages through comprehensible input. That's the method I use, right?